If you were here last Sunday, I think you'll agree it was an encouraging Sunday, not just in terms of a large number of people together, including regulars and guests and families and friends and new friends to be, but also a big confidence. 1 Peter is a wonderful passage, and it's always encouraging to be reminded of the hope that is ours. I guess you could say if this is Low Sunday, then last Sunday is meant to be the big Sunday. And it is an encouraging Sunday of the year. One might be tempted to call it the mountain top experience of the year. Just as, in a sense, Sunday is the mountain top experience of our lives. We had Debbie this morning coming back from spring harvest, encouraged and excited. A few of us the week before were in Word Alive, encouraged. There's something about bigger crowds, and there's something about bigger children's works, and there's something about coming together which is super encouraging. A gathered people is a mountaintop experience. Now, on the one hand, that is a good thing. It's good to meet together. In fact, the Bible says it's not good not to meet together. Psalm 133 says that when we dwell together in unity, that's where God commands his blessing. The Lord Jesus in John 17 prayed that we would be one. And ultimately, we're going to heaven where we're all going to get to be together. So as one of our former ministers, Geraint Fielder, used to say, you better get on now to get used to it, ready for heaven. It's something like that he used to say, isn't it? So get on now. It's a wonderful thing. But here's my question. And see why you've got the question on your sheet here. We're going to see, I got this statistic wrong until this week. So we're going to see if you get it right straight away. What percentage of your life, and let's just go for waking hours, what percentage of your waking life is spent in church? This is an interesting question, isn't it? You're going to start doing the maths in your head now. For the average churchgoer, what percentage of your waking life is spent in church? I see the CY in the top corner there writing that down. So who wants to go for a guess? What percentage of your waking life is spent in church? Anybody want to guess a percentage? Go on then, Tom. 1%. Oh, right. Anybody going to go higher or lower? I don't know if you can go lower. I guess you can with decimals. Yeah, Eilis? 2%. Wow. This is good. 0.1%. Well, now remember, this is waking hours. But it's interesting. So I read a book this week, and this is where it made me think. And the author claimed 3%. So I did the maths, I worked it out. And actually, I think probably in his church it was 3%. But I think in our church, we're probably a little bit more godly than his church. And I think we're somewhere between 3 to 5%. Which, if I'm honest, I always thought it was higher. You'd often think it was higher, that your time in church was more than 5%. But actually, when you work it out, the percentage of your waking hours in church is about 3 to 5%, which means that 95% of your lives have nothing to do with an official church meeting or this mountaintop experience. But actually, that's a little bit misleading, because it doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with it. But it definitely changes the way you think about this meeting. If it's less than 5% of your time, and 95% of your waking life is spent elsewhere, you've got to ask the question, what is this meeting about? Particularly when you consider, as Scripture Union has shown us, that 95% of children and people in our society have no contact with any Christians. No, those are two stark, interesting facts, aren't they? 95% of people in society today have no contact with the local church, which seems terrible until you remember 95% of the local church's time has nothing to do with a meeting. That's quite exciting, isn't it? Those two 95s coming together. You see, actually, the way we should view church is the 5% is when we come together so that we can go out and make the most of the 95%. And when we go out in the 95% of our time, it should be about the 95% of people who don't come to church. And I think it's an act of providence, isn't it, that I come to Matthew 28 on this sermon on the week that dear George Verwer has gone to be with the Lord. I shared about George Verwer last week. Anybody got memories of listening to George Verwer preach? I mean, George Verwer started Operation Mobilisation, a great encourager for world mission. I can remember the early 90s being in a conference, a youth conference in Kevin just above Newtown, Tarnar Lade. What a conference. And there was George Verwer with his jacket, which had does anybody know what was on his jacket? A globe and an inflatable globe to make sure you knew it was all about world mission. And it was great. I can still remember that weekend. I was a young teenager hearing sermons from the Great Commission in Matthew 28. And so it's so important for us to remember this week, as we come to the end of Matthew's Gospel, our year-long series, that we remember that we gather on a Sunday in order to scatter. And the two are completely linked. The best way to be in the world is to gather with a scattering mentality. And I want to share with you this morning from Matthew 28 how we can go with confidence and how we can scatter with power. So let's walk through Matthew 28 together. The first point is this. We see the first thing in verses 1 to 10, the great confirmation. The great confirmation. That's what we see in verses 1 to 10. You see, as we've gone through Matthew's Gospel, really what we've been looking at is the evidence for King Jesus. Is Jesus God come to earth or not? And interestingly, at the end of Matthew's Gospel, if you saw it in the reading, we've come full circle. So in Matthew 28, there's echoes of Matthew 1 and 2. There's some very interesting parallels. So Mary is here again in verse 1. There's an angel in verse 2. And the angel says, do not be afraid. Starting to seem a lot like a Christmas sermon, doesn't it? And then the angel says to Joseph, go. The angel says, to the women, go, just as he had said to Joseph. And then the place name that comes up, Galilee, where Jesus began his ministry. And we could go on with these echoes. We could also go back to the Sermon on the Mount and the mountain. Matthew has presented all of this information about Jesus in such a way that all of these links work internally in Matthew, but then, as hopefully you remember, also goes back to the Old Testament. In a sense, what we have here is the greater Moses has come now victorious on the mountain. And so what we've done is we've come full circle, and Matthew 28 is proving the promises and the pictures and the prophecies of Matthew 1. Here is Emmanuel, God with us. Here is Jesus, God to the rescue. Here is Christ, the Messiah, is here. How do we know this? Because Jesus has risen. The tomb is empty. Death has been defeated. And I love the way the passage describes it in verse 2. There was a violent earthquake. I think that is a statement on two levels. The Bible often does that, doesn't it? Do you remember Nicodemus in John's Gospel? He goes out into the night, into the dark. And I think there's something here on two levels. I think there was an earthquake. When the Gospels record history, they are recording history. There was an earthquake. But I think the earthquake was representative of what was happening. There wasn't just an earthquake physically, but there was an earthquake eternally. This is, in Matthew 28, an earthquake moment. Jesus has shook everything up. The resurrection of Jesus from the dead shows that he's conquered the grave. He has smashed it. Think about the way we use language. Think about politics. There's been a seismic change in the political landscape. He or she has come in and has shook everything up. What's happened in verse 1, this whole idea that Jesus is risen from the dead, is represented as an earthquake. And really the earthquake is there in verse 1, in that verse 1 is overturning Genesis. You can see that, can't you? Have a look at it. Do you remember Genesis 1 and 2 and how God creates the world? Do you remember the order? He creates day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. And then the seventh day he calls the Sabbath day because he rested from all his work. And really that is life, isn't it? Work hard and you can rest. Do what you need to do, earn it, and you can rest. And then the resurrection comes, and it says in verse 1, after the Sabbath, at dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went out to look for the tomb. What's happening? There is now a new week. And in fact, the early church then we best start worshipping on the Sunday. We best start our week with a Sabbath. We start our week with a rest. Because with Jesus rising from the dead, it's the great confirmation that his life he lived was perfect and he lived it on our behalf, that his death was perfect and sufficient and he died it on our behalf, and his resurrection was perfect and sufficient and he has risen for us, the first fruits from among the dead. Which means now, if you trust in Christ, all that is his is yours. So you don't have to work in order to earn rest. You don't have to work in order to earn eternal life. You don't have to work in order to earn life. Actually, it's given to you by Jesus. Your starting point is grace, and then you go into the week. Really, what a Sunday is about is a mountaintop experience where we come together. And can I just say, for those of you who have been to big conferences, when I say mountaintop experiences, now, we've had a great band this morning, so that's wonderful. Don't take this as a comment about the band. But I'm not talking about the quality of the leading or the preaching or the music or the tech or the setup or the coffee. Now, it is particularly good here. Please stay for the tea and coffee afterwards. They are amazing. But that's not what makes a mountaintop experience. Otherwise, you're going to be chasing perfection at the expense of grace. What creates a mountaintop experience is the gospel. It's Christ. It's seeing Jesus, being filled with his Spirit, being drawn to the Father. And that really doesn't matter whether there's 20 of you, whether there's live music or not, whether the tech works or not, whether the preacher goes on too long or not. Those things are immaterial. Take note of that. Those things are immaterial. The question is, have you met with the living God? And that's a mountaintop experience that sends us out. You see, there's been an earthquake, and we are sent out in it. And the greatest earthquake is the Lord Jesus rising from the dead. One commentator puts it like this: the powers that have oppressed earth are overthrown by the invasion of heaven's king. That's what's happened in Matthew's gospel. The powers that have oppressed earth are overthrown by the invasion of heaven's king. And so, really, in verses 1 to 10, we get the great confirmation. The rising from the dead and the physical appearances of Jesus and people seeing him and knowing him and running off to tell people is all about the great confirmation. Jesus is king, and he gives a new start. Perhaps you're here this morning and you would love a new start. I was reading a book this morning, and it was a guy sharing his life story. And he was talking about some decisions he'd made as a teenager. And in the book, he talks about these decisions he'd made where just afterwards he felt sick to the pit of his stomach because of the things he'd done. About cycles of things that he'd gone into and he just couldn't get out of them. And the shame and the guilt he felt. And this sense that by the messaging he'd heard from his kind of upbringing made him feel that now that he'd done those things, he'd ruined everything else in his future. Just felt like he'd lost everything because as a teenager, he'd just done these relatively simple things. Do you know, he was desperate in that book for a fresh start, for a new beginning. If you're here this morning and you need a fresh start, a new beginning, here's the amazing news of the gospel. Jesus can give each and every one of us a fresh start, a new beginning, a clean slate, paid in full. Life is yours. You don't have to earn it. How many people want to do things? I was watching a film last night, and one of the central characters, interestingly, was doing all of these things, and someone else was about to save the day, and she said, "Don't do it. I want to redeem myself. Don't take that away from me." How many of us are working hard to redeem ourselves? You know, Jesus has an earthquake moment. He's beaten death, and he gives us life. So if you're here this morning and you want a fresh start, new life, Jesus offers it to you. It's a gift to be taken. It's something to be had. So what should we do in face of this great confirmation? Well, it's very simple. Verse 7 and verse 10 tell us what to do. Verse 7, then go quickly and tell his disciples. That's what the angel of the Lord tells them to do. And then verse 10, again, Jesus comes on. He says, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. Here's the big news. When you see the resurrection, when you know that earthquake moment, you should go and you should tell. There is amazing news to tell. Now, who knows what's going to happen to our mobile phones in the UK for the first time this week? Does anybody know what's going to happen? If you're on 4G or 5G, at least. Emergency, oh, are we all excited? We're all wondering, why are they making us have these emergency alerts? I'll let you discuss that over dinner. But this week, the government are going to access all of our phones, and an emergency alert, no matter what you're doing, even if it's on silent, your phone's going to vibrate. So double check that, because you might have a meeting in work. But it's all going to come out. Now, I've got friends who have realized that you can go into your settings and you can turn the alert off before it happens. I shouldn't have told you that, but you can do that. Here's the interesting thing, isn't it? When it comes to news and alerts, some of us want to tell, and sometimes some of us don't want to tell. And what you've got here is this amazing moment of confirmation, and some people are going to tell and other people aren't. So let's look secondly at the great controversy, because in verses 11 to 15, we get the birth of a controversy that has been going on ever since this first day. So the women see it, the guards see it, they all can see the empty tomb, they've all met the angel, they've all felt the earthquake, and so the women now, they've been told, go and tell. And what happens is you get two groups of people running from the empty tomb. Have you noticed that before? So verse 11 says, while the women were on their way, there goes group one. Here's my top tip for you. If you want to live a good and godly life, follow the women in this passage, okay? They're the ones to follow. So they go and they tell. And then it says this, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priests everything that had happened. It's very interesting, isn't it? They're going and telling. They've seen the risen Jesus. They've seen the empty tomb. They've felt the earthquake. I think these guys are with the centurion at the cross. Surely this is the Son of Man. This is God. Surely here is the Saviour. I agree with lots of commentators that say that they start out as faithful witnesses. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before. The women have gone to tell. They've gone to tell. And who do they go to tell? They go to tell the chief priests, the religious authorities, the ones who have all of the Old Testament prophecies, the ones who have heard all about Jesus coming, the ones who have been looking into Jesus. Surely, when they get these guards coming and telling them all that they've seen, they will believe too. Surely an eyewitness account is enough. Well, they go, they report everything, and what does verse 12 say? When the chief priests had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, you're to say his disciples came during the night and stole him away while they were asleep. This is one of the saddest verses in Matthew's gospel. They've been waiting for hundreds, for thousands of years for the Messiah. He has come. He has proven himself. We've now had the great confirmation. They've now had eyewitnesses with no theological background, no skin in the game. They're just hired hands, and they've seen the resurrection. They've come and told them all of their eyewitness accounts, and they've gone, no, you're okay. Should we go and have a look? No, you're okay. But do you want to come and find out? No, you're okay. Yeah, but he really... No, you're okay. In fact, what we're going to do is... we want you to tell everybody that someone came and stole the body. But they didn't. Yeah, but we want you to tell people. Yeah, but they didn't. We'll give you money. Pardon? We'll give you money. Okay. Just like Judas. Saw so much. And the money came. Friends, I want to make a point this morning, and I don't want to offend anybody when I make this point. But our beliefs are always morally bound. We believe things because of the moral implications. We often think that intellectual pursuits are devoid of morality and behavior, that they're merely intellectual. They're not. Always mixed in with our intellect is the impact on our lives. We need to understand that. You see, why don't the chief priests want to believe? Is it through lack of evidence? Evidence is pretty clear. Think of all the things, if you're thinking about Christianity this morning, or remember the time when you weren't a Christian, or think about a time when you've struggled with doubt, think of all the things you'll say, if this happens, I will believe. Well, if I saw Jesus, I'd believe. If I had an eyewitness account, I'd believe. They've got all of that, and they're saying, no. We won't believe. Why? Because the implications of believing. See, here's the reality. The gospel and that first Easter is an earthquake. And when you become a Christian, it does cause an earthquake in your life. We have to change the way we live, because who is it that has come and caused the earthquake? It is King Jesus. So in becoming a Christian, we are handing over lordship of our life to someone else. In becoming a Christian, we're giving the decision-making powers of our life to someone else. And that is a huge earthquake. And honestly, for a long time, even though I became a Christian at quite a young age, for a long time prior to that, my big problem was this. Do I really want to give Jesus the rights to my life? Do I really want him to be in on every decision? Now that is quite a frightening thought, unless you get who God is. God is the all-powerful one, who is the all-loving one, the one who gave his only son to live and die for us, to rise for us. Actually, giving our lives to God isn't about losing our freedom, but it's finding our true freedom. That's what it's all about. It's finding ourselves in him and living the way we've been designed to live. It's living with the one who knows best and who leads us in an amazing way. Lots of us, I think, are looking into Jesus and the reality, and we're asking really good questions. I get asked good questions about Christian faith all the time, and I'm excited about Alpha starting this week. I think it's great to have places where you can come and ask any question and no question is offensive. I think that's always great, to just create somewhere where you can ask anything, and honestly, don't worry, I won't be offended. You can disagree with anything, that's fine. I think the church should be one place in society where everybody can say whatever they think, and they're not thought of any less because we disagree. There should be a place where we can think freely. But when we come, we need to all admit that we're not blank canvas. I think sometimes we think that everybody is just neutral, blank canvas, and we're going to look at the evidence of Christianity and we're just going to judge it on its merits. That's not quite true. None of us are blank canvases. I've got loads of assumptions I bring into everything. I've got loads of experiences I bring into everything. I've got loads of things that I think words mean when I come into something. Sometimes I feel like I can be talking to someone. Have you ever had this experience? And you're using the same words, but you're clearly talking about different things. Have you ever had that experience? My old pastor, when I was a teenager, he used to have a standard response to every question that used to really annoy me. But I think 30 years on, I understand what he meant. But, you know, I'd say something like, but surely you can't believe in a God like that. And he goes, probably not. Because I probably don't believe in the God you think I believe in. Let me tell you what the God I actually believe in. Because often we have so much baggage with these things. And a lot, really, of exploring Christianity is about clearing that away. So that when we're talking about God, we're coming back to the Bible and the God who's revealed himself in Jesus. When we're talking about grace, we're talking about the grace of the Bible. When we're talking about the kingship of Jesus, we're talking about a good kingship, not one where we're thinking of dictators and self-serving kind of dictators. And so we need to realize that when we come, we're not blank canvases. So what does that mean? That means that even in our pursuit of Christianity, we should pray. I can still remember one of my first prayers. God, if you're there, I was going to hedge my bets a little bit. God, if you're there, reveal yourself to me. Still wasn't sure. And it means that when we do evangelism, we've got to make sure that we're speaking on the same page, that we understand each other, but also that we're praying. Because actually, whilst we're not blank canvases just looking at the evidence, also, we're not devoid of any contact with God. The amazing news of the gospel is that God opens our eyes to understand these things. So really, our evangelism should be filled with patience and prayer. It's a top tip for you this morning. If you want to share the gospel with someone, fill it with patience and prayer. And if you're this morning looking into Christianity, can I encourage you to fill it with patience and prayer? Sometimes you might think, this doesn't make sense. Okay, well, let's try it from a different angle. Let's pray and look at it again. And so we come and really what happens now is we start this great controversy. Where now people are going to start saying things that just simply aren't true. But it's their way out. They don't want to have the earthquake in their life, so they're just going to make something else up. Friends, when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, are you going to rejoice in it, or are you going to reject it? What do you make of the empty tomb? And Christians, when it comes to the empty tomb and Jesus telling us to go, are you going to be like the faithful women or the fickle guards, who, when it was going to cost them something, decided just to deny it? I think we need to be like the women who are willing to go into a hostile environment and just tell people what they've seen. And you know what? In those days, they wouldn't have even been trusted in a law court. It was terrible. But they're still going to go and tell. They don't care about how it sounds. They don't care about anything like that. They're just going to do it. Which is where we get, thirdly and finally, the Great Commission. The Great Commission. So even though there is this great controversy, Jesus comes, and he comes to tell people to go. Now, I love these verses, and verses 16 to 20 are actually our verses for the year. So we're settling now on our verses for the year. And really what he does is he calls them to the mountain, and he calls them to the mountain in order to scatter them. Whenever we gather, it's always to scatter. You see, when you think about coming on a Sunday and meeting with Jesus, what we're doing is we're meeting to encourage one another. That's why it's great when we sing. The wonderful thing about singing is, yes, it glorifies God, and God enjoys our singing. But actually the second reason singing is great is because everybody else enjoys it. Now, I get the best seats in the house, I'll be honest. When you sit in the front row, it's the best place to sit, honestly, because everybody else is singing behind you. So you get the best sound, and I love it. It's wonderful. Sometimes you're feeling down, you come to church on a Sunday, and when you all sing together, you're encouraged. You're singing amazing truths together. And it's not just in the singing, it's in what we say to one another over the teas and coffees at the end. Or someone just coming up and thanking you for something. We can encourage one another. But also on a Sunday, what we're doing is we're establishing one another in the faith. And we're going through Colossians on a Sunday evening at the moment. Paul teaches us that's what we're doing. We come together to establish one another, to make sure that we're firm. That's why, as a church, we preach through books of the Bible. We're coming to the end of Matthew. If you'd like to know what we're doing next week, I've put it off for the first 20 years of my ministry. We're going to go through Romans. So until 2032, I will be slowly... No. We're going to go through it quite a pace. We are going to go through it quite a pace. But it's really important to us as a church that we preach through books of the Bible. We also do thematic series as well. We're not really kind of, it's a hill to die on. But it is important for us that we teach all of the Bible. So we come to establish... But as well, when we're meeting together on a Sunday and in our small groups, we want to equip one another. That's really what we're here to do. Equipping one another to live holy lives, to live as light in a dark world. And when you look at this Great Commission, you see what Jesus encourages us to do. It is a wonderful commission. Let me just point out a couple of things as we come to an end. The first thing I want to point out about this Great Commission is this. We are empowered by the King with earthquake authority. So important. When you leave this place on a Sunday, you are empowered by the King with earthquake authority. Think about the women. They are, verse 8, do you see it there? Afraid. They are afraid. Mark's gospel, interestingly, ends on that note originally. The women are afraid. And I think someone just went, we can't end a gospel with women being afraid. We better add something about standing on scorpions or something. Anyway, we can discuss that at another time. The whole point is, we're scared to admit that we're afraid. The Bible never hides it. Never hides it. Do you know, most of us, if we're honest, when we share the gospel, are scared silly. Scared stiff. We're like the women, but that's okay. Because, verse 8, we can be filled with joy. Look at that. They hurry away from the tomb, afraid, yet filled with joy. That's kind of how you should feel at the end of a Sunday service. You should be filled with joy, but afraid. It's like, Jesus is alive, and he wants me to tell everybody about him. That is brilliant, But that's scary. But it's wonderful. And then we can go. And we need to remember, what does he say? The Great Commission. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go. It's because Jesus is king. It's because of the great confirmation. It's because he's risen from the dead we can go. And as Debbie got us to learn in verse 20, and surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. We need to remember, in a sense, what we're doing when we gather is we're coming to plug into the power supply. Now, that can be a helpful and an unhelpful illustration. I never want you to think that Sunday is the only place you get your power supply. I think each and every day you should be reading the Bible and praying. You can do that in an organized or an organic manner, and God can meet with us in many and various ways through lots of different moddion grass. That's a bad one when I come to a Welsh phrase then. Means of grace. Thank you very much. I knew there's a translator in the room. Means of grace, which in Welsh, just to encourage you, moddion grass means medicines of grace. Theology is much better in Welsh. This is my new thing. It's a lovely thing, isn't it? Medicines of grace. And so even in all of those midweek, God can give us power. We can be filled with the Spirit in many and very different ways. But ultimately, God has designed it that we come together, encourage one another. And really, we do that. And so, really, we want to make sure that we don't miss these times together, because they're important, not just for us, but for everybody else. When you come, you are encouraged, but when you come, you encourage others. And we come so that we can go, so that we can scatter. And as we go, look at what we're meant to do. I mean, it's just amazing, isn't it? When you go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. That basically means that what we're doing today is the Great Commission. Everything the church does is part of the Great Commission, because we're teaching one another to do these things. We baptize as a church. But we need to understand that the Great Commission is more than what we do on a Sunday. Sunday is part of it, but it's not all of it. We need to learn to go. And can I say, we shouldn't just go to the 95% in our communities. Some of us need to be going to those around the world who have no access to the Christian gospel. There are so many different places where there aren't as many Christians, even as in Abergavenny. And there are so many places where perhaps God is laying on your heart a love for that culture or those people or that language. And the Lord is calling you to go and share the gospel there. It's so important to remember that God wants us all to be missionaries of one sort where we are, gathering to scatter, but he also wants some of us to go cross-culturally, to go away. The amazing thing is today you can be a cross-cultural missionary even in Abergavenny. It's amazing, isn't it? Some people have homed people from Ukraine. That's been wonderful. Others of you, through different groups and societies, meet people from all around the world. It's amazing that you can do that kind of international work even here. We should all be involved in that. But could it be this morning that perhaps someone is feeling led by the Lord? Actually, global mission is something for me. Maybe the Lord is calling me to go. And the gifts he's given me are those that I can use somewhere else. The Great Commission is huge. As I come to an end, let me tell you the illustration that's come to mind for me this week. I think this gathering and scattering mentality is basically the breathing of the church. That's how I'm thinking about it. When we gather, we're breathing in on a Sunday. We come to get breath, the breath of the Spirit. We come to get life, to encourage one another. And it's so important when you breathe in. If you only breathe in and never breathe out, what happens before you die? You cough and make a mess everywhere, don't you? And that's Christians who just breathe in on a Sunday. You come and you just cause a mess everywhere. You've got to breathe in and then breathe out. That's what we do, going with the 95% of our time to the 95%. We breathe in, we breathe out. We gather, we scatter. We gather, we scatter. Friends, this is a call for all of us. No matter what our age, no matter whether we find it joy-filling or afraid-filling, I think he'll do both. But when we realize that Jesus is with us, he is risen from the dead, and we have his earthquake authority, I think we can go. And I pray that we would see the Lord use us as we do. Well, we're going to sing a wonderful old hymn together now with great words that we're going to sing to one another. Go forth and tell. Let's stand and sing, Go forth and tell.